Hi, Nicole.
Megan.
Megan Leigh.
And I'm Nicole Danielle.
And this is Romance on the Rocks, where two bookish biddies imbibe. What you drinking?
Oh, we're diving right in.
I'm just going right into it. Into it.
Yes, Megan, let's dive right into the cocktails. You and I have been trying to find themes for our cocktails per our books for the episode. It's not happening for tonight. It's just not, because I think she had some champagne at one point in the book, the main character, and I'm going to use that loosely because I don't know if it was champagne. I don't know if she knew if it was champagne. So I am just drinking some white wine per part of our dinner plans this evening with my husband. It is called Debonair. It's
a pretty bottle.
Sauvignon Blanc. I love a good wine bottle. I am 100% one of those people who will often buy wine based sheerly on the label alone. Cute name, cute art, whatever. I sent my husband Bob, and I have to pause for one moment there because I feel like Dorothy on Golden Girls every time that I say my husband Bob on this show, because you know who Bob is. But some of our listeners may not. But I feel like Dorothy on Golden Girls, because every time her ex-husband would show up on Golden Girls, he would announce to the room, "Hi, Dorothy, it's me, Stan, your ex-husband."
Like she would have forgotten.
Like she would have forgotten. But I also understand he was such an infrequent character on the show. They needed to explain who he was. So my husband, Bob.
Oh, can I just say too, as you're saying my husband, Bob, you're holding up the bottle. It looks like your husband, Bob, is the bottle. Are you now writing your own romance novel about an inanimate object? Is that what's going on here?
No, ew, no.
He was tall and slender like a bottle of wine.
Ew. No, thank you. So it's a Sauvignon Blanc, and my friend Bass, who you know, Matt Basowitz, him and I have an agreement that a bottle of wine is one serving. So if you can tell, that's where I'm at tonight.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, I still have this, but Megan, I've been pre-gaming. So.
Well, I'd be lying if I said I hadn't also. However, it's been a bit. My first drink was with dinner, and dinner was around like 4:00. So I'm a couple hours past that. So I'm kind of starting from scratch. But hear me out. My book definitely had a theme. And it was not a theme that I'm happy with. But I'm going to do it anyway. So to our audience members, please bear with me. The people in my book are of proud Scottish descent, and there's a lot of Scotch drinking. And it is not something that I particularly care for, and Scotch is usually consumed just on ice. So I went to my neighborhood liquor store today and had to look for a bottle of Scotch, and I was really hoping they'd just have the tiniest of bottles. But unfortunately, not only did I have to get the big Mamma Jamma, I had to get the one that was Clan McGregor, because my book is about Alan McGregor.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that you found that.
So I saw this bottle, and first of all, it's a plastic bottle. I effing hate plastic bottles.
Oh,
I'm sorry, Scotch in a plastic bottle. You know this is going to be tremendously awful, and I already am so afraid. And when I saw it on the shelf, I literally stopped in my tracks and audibly went, "Oh no!" And I had to pick it up, and put it in my cart, and walk to the front.
We need to take one for the team, Megan.
Oh God, my hands are so sweaty. I don't even want to open this. I don't even know if I can open this. Oh no. I should have at least done that before I sat down. Oh, here we go.
Oh,
okay.
I heard the snap of plastic.
You hear that? Here we go. All right. We're going to take a sip. See if I'm as brave as the gal in my book. That could be worse. All right. I'll go with it.
Okay.
Clan McGregor for the win. So anyway, hey, we read some books too.
We read some books.
These were not our favorites so far.
Oh God.
So the year can only go up.
Although
from here.
not my least favorite either, but not my favorite.
Yeah, same. I think you get to go first this time around.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's February. We're doing political rama.
Mm-hmm.
And help me remember, Meghan, the unifying theme, senators.
Yeah, I think we
for
both
this
have
one?
senators.
Okay, because
Although-
last time it was
although I-
mayoral.
Well,
mayors.
I thought that you weren't really even sure what the political level was for your book. I know mine's
Currently.
a senator for sure. But you were like, I don't know, something. He's running for something.
Well, he does have political
Vague.
office.
Vague
I don't know.
politics.
May don't know. What if I double check? May don't know.
But it's political
so-
nonetheless. So
Yeah.
So happy February. We've got President's Day this month, and so we were going off script. No Valentine's Day drama.
Yeah.
For
Screw
us.
it.
We want the romance to be political.
Yeah. I present
So-
to you Janet Dailey's Americana series. This would be my second book, my second state that I'm hitting within the course of our project here. This is Michigan.
Yeah. This is
Enemy in
not
camp.
the UP. This is the mitten of Michigan. right?
Well, part of it's in Detroit, and then part of it's Mackinac Island. So is Mackinac Island considered UP, or is it considered Michigan proper?
That's a good question.
I'm unclear.
I would give it to the UP, but only if the people are super weird. So I'm just saying, that's why Wisconsin claims the UP. They're folk like us, but just a little bit weirder.
I love the UP. Honestly,
I do too. That's where my relatives are from. So this is not me disparaging. This is just me claiming my roots.
Right.
Anyway,
where do I start with this book? Oh, God Almighty. Okay.
when was it published? What are we looking at here?
Great. Let's start there. 1980. But I have to tell you, Meghan, I kept having a lot of conversations with Bob, my husband, throughout reading this book because we were doing a lot of driving back and forth between North Carolina and Wisconsin recently. So I was reading in the car and I was just not able to contain my comments to myself while reading. And he got to hear them in the car. And when I told him the publishing date, because he asked, he's like, for real? Even he was shocked. So
Did it feel like a book that was written earlier than that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Food. We're trying to hit food this year. We have lake fish, but of an indeterminate kind, because why actually mention what kind of lake fish it is, which I'm like, there's a lot of lake fish out there.
There are, but I'm going to say it's either whitefish or lawyer.
I don't know. There was a relish tray, which I low-key got excited about because I love a relish tray, actually. I feel like it's a very Midwest thing, but I could be wrong.
When I was younger, my brain assumed relish tray, pickles, olives, things like that. I didn't also put in there that the relish tray would include the vegetables. And a lot of people, like, relish tray actually means like the cauliflower and the
like a little
carrots and
veggie
stuff.
tray. Yeah.
Yeah, like a veggie tray. And in my mind, those were two separate things. But I think in the Midwest, it's actually kind of synonymous. People say relish tray and they actually mean with the veggies and stuff as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm
honestly,
glad to have known that because it makes me love the relish tray even more, that it's so wholesome and all encompassing.
My personal thoughts on the relish tray are you take some shit that's in the fridge. And that could be carrots, that could be pickles, it could be olives, it could be a little celery, and you just throw that shit on a tray.
It's charcuterie's down-home cousin.
Yes. Yeah. Legit. Our main characters in Enemy in Camp are Victoria Beaumont. I don't know that I know people coming out of Michigan with a name like Beaumont, but okay, we'll go with it. She has a nickname of Tory. She's a socialite. Meghan, she has no job.
In Michigan. She's a socialite in Michigan.
Yeah, because that's something we see.
Did Miss Dailey not do her research?
I don't know, Meghan. There's a lot of I don't know about happening in this book.
Here's the thing. I feel like she wrote this book and it was supposed to be in like Virginia. And then she realized she didn't have anything for Michigan and she just slapped a new state on it because a socialite named Victoria Beaumont in Michigan.
Yeah.
Proceed.
Her nickname is Tory. She is college educated, holds a college degree. She does some nice charitable work. We love charitable work. Then we have Dirk Ramsey.
Dick Ramsey?
Dirk. D-I-R-K.
The way you said it. You got Dick Ramsey. What?
Dirk Ramsey. And I hate the name Dirk, personally.
I do too, but it's slightly better than Dick Ramsey.
Dirk Ramsey, he's a political journalist, and I'm just going to say a total fucking ass. This guy is such a douche. Okay, I'm going to stop there. We'll get into that. It begins in Detroit and ends up in Mackinac Island and then goes back to Detroit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
I really feel like Detroit was a very minimal pre-thought and a very minimal post-thought. I don't know. So, Tory's dad is a politician, indeterminate. Could he be a senator? Could he be a representative of the state of Congress? Who the F knows? But he represents Michigan in some capacity.
He's the head of the school board in Detroit.
It sounds like he's got a fairly sizable position because he's influencing governors and climbing up the political ladder. May run for governor himself at some point or something beyond that. But it's never really actually stated what he is.
Are you saying that the school board members are not the ones wielding power? All right.
Man, apparently not. So good old daddy invites Dirk to their summer house in Mackinac Island so he can get to know them better as a family, because apparently he's writing some salacious, and I'm going to use salacious loosely. I think that's a judgment on the family's part. But this political journalist, Dirk, has been writing things that are not favorable for this particular politician or his family. And so it makes total sense to invite a journalist to your private home for 2 weeks so you can convince them to write favorably about you. Does that sound, Meghan, as a journalism major, does that sound ethical to you?
Well, Nicole, as somebody who was in journalism ethics class with you, I feel as though if that had been given to us as an assignment, we would have both said, nah, bad idea.
Agreed.
Thank you, Professor Kramer.
Yes, thank you. Tory refers to it when she finds out what her dad has planned as having an enemy in camp. I get the connotation and therefore the title of the book. Sure, whatever. Sure. Another key character, we'll get to this. 16-year-old sister Penny, for reference, Tory is mid-20s and Dirk is early 30s. This guy is completely inappropriate from the start when he shows up at their house. He arrives early to their summer house, and even though she was out sunbathing in her bikini, she was doing so privately, and she was going to change before the set arrival time. Then one of the servants, because a lot of people in Upper Michigan have servants.
Well, I mean, granted, they have a summer house in Mackinac Island, so if anybody was going to have servants, it'd be folks like that. So sure. I'll give them that.
So it's a French maid, too.
Sure.
Boarded. Yeah. So the maid's like, hey, this guy's here already. So Tory's like, oh, I'm going to change out of my bikini. That's not a way to greet somebody. I'm going to stop my tanning. I'm going to go meet him. Somehow, Dirk still saw her in her bikini. Let me read you a little excerpt. Brace yourself, Meghan. We're going down a wild road.
I'm ready. I sat back. I'm ready for this. Let's do it.
Here's Tory. It would hardly have been proper to meet you in such attire, would it? She countered smoothly. Dirk. Let's just say that if you had, I probably would have been thinking some very improper thoughts. The inflection of his rich voice was deliberately evocative. He nonchalantly lessened the distance between them, his dark eyes holding her look. What are you? The advance guard? I don't think I know what you're talking about, Victoria tried to retain a pleasant tone, although all her senses were becoming increasingly wary of his nearness. Was this all designed to soften me up? Dirk continued to regard her with a velvet quality. All these dangerous curves, and his sun-browned fingers traced the line of her bare shoulder. Soft shoulders.
I don't feel like he was being softened up so much as hardened up.
Yeah, that's accurate. Also, dude, you're a journalist and you just met her and you're touching her like physically. Oh my God. Every part of my being was like, that's not journalism.
I feel like in that regard, your book and my book have a lot in common.
We've talked previously about pepper spray. And I suppose we should have had our trigger warnings at the start of this episode. So let me put them in now. I got trigger warnings, all kinds of trigger warnings. There's going to be pepper spray. There's going to be sexual assault. But let's begin with a bottle of water spray. You know how when pets get out of line, you spray them with a little water to get them to calm down? To me, that was a water spray moment. Spray that little asshole down with some water and get him to simmer down and stop and back that ass up. So, water spray moment.
Retract the claws, my friend.
Yes. You are a naughty dog, naughty cat, water spray. Back up. She takes him to the guest room and just happens to kind of half sit on the edge of the bed. Now, mind you, she's fully clothed. She's not still bikini mode. She's just kind of resting against it and they're talking. Brace yourself. I got more. This is Dirk. You look very natural sitting on that bed, Dirk observed. Are you part of the furnishings? Something to keep me warm at night so I don't have to use those blankets in the closet? Her response is, I think that was uncalled for, Victoria finally managed to murmur tautly. The door beckoned with an escape route, and Victoria ordered her legs to take it. Averting her gaze from his compelling face, she moved away from the bed, taking the short, straight-line route to the door. It meant walking past him, but she didn't expect Dirk to stop her. When she was level with him, an arm came out to cross in front of her and hook a hand on the side of her waist. Victoria took an instant step backward to avoid the hard biceps that had flexed against her breasts. His hand stayed on her waist, his fingers firm in their spreading clasp. His touch started miniature tremors in her stomach to confuse her. You're right. His voice was low and almost reluctant in its admission. Victoria was surprised he admitted it at all and lifted her gaze to his incredible handsome face. Immediately, she felt drawn by the mysterious blackness of his eyes. The dangerous enchantment made her heart beat faster. I was fantasizing about how enjoyable it could be to have you for a sleeping companion. Something a proper guest wouldn't admit, but I could hardly be described as proper. Again, you're a journalist. What the fuck are you doing, dude?
We didn't say he was a good journalist.
Well, I'm going to count him as the shittiest journalist on the planet.
I feel like you and I knew some terrible journalists back in the day, so I guess it really shouldn't come as a surprise.
I agree, but also I'm still just fucking floored. So there's that. And with that, we have our first breast reference.
I noted that. I was going to ask you what page we were on.
43, 44 for the first page reference. So Tory makes it clear repeatedly as we go through this story that she has only contempt for him. But this guy is just constantly inappropriate, touchy-feely, constantly making sexual innuendos. I mean, if those first two quotes don't kind of indicate what's happening, I don't know what does. Even during games of tennis with her parents, he's still doing this shit in front of them.
Oh.
Which floors me even more.
No.
And he does it to the little sister, too.
No, come on.
I know, it's crazy. And when she continues to rebuff his advances, he comes up with this shit. Here's Dirk again. Unmarried, no engagement ring, no men friends, no lover. At least I haven't seen any evidence of one. You are a beautiful woman, Victoria. What's the matter? Are you frigid or are you training to become a nun?
I flipping hate when women are called frigid. I hate that so much because it's like the only reason you're not with a man must be because there's something wrong with you, not because there's anything wrong with men or any of the guys you've met. It must
or
be
this
you.
particular douchey guy. It couldn't be him.
You're just
It's
a
gotta be
frozen
her.
popsicle. Gross.
I agree with you 100%. The frigid thing drives me batshit crazy. It's like, no, there's other reasons, dude. There's other reasons.
You're one of them.
You're
you
one
and
of
your
them.
smarmy.
With the little sister, she's been lusting after him. God only knows why. And
I'm sorry. The 16-year-old wants to go for the 30-something-year-old?
Yes.
No.
And he does things like kiss her on the cheek and almost flirting with her. And it's all in front of the parents. And I'm just like, it can't get any worse. And then this book does get worse with sexual assaults. About page 113, Tory's like, I don't want this to happen, because they go out on like a little day trip sightseeing thing around Mackinac Island. And he basically calls her a liar and proceeds to sexually assault her, including grabbing her boobs under her shirt. And this is where I bust out the pepper spray per our spice rankings and pepper spray and stuff. She tells him no, clearly in the story, and finally manages to get away from him. And he's a total dick about it. Like, what's your problem? Later, they go to a formal party hosted by one of the other Mackinac Island residents. She is starting to come around inexplicably on her feelings for him. And she does feel physically attracted to him, although I don't understand why. Whatevs. And I feel like he's been incredibly manipulative and rapey throughout this whole freaking book. Anyway, she's still uncertain of her feelings for him, though. So when they start to get intimate during and after this party, she's still like, no, I'm not sure what I want or how I really feel. I don't know what your intentions are or why you're trying to have sex with me, which are all valid, fair questions. Like, is this part of a journalism stunt for his story?
Yeah. Ulterior motives.
Exactly. And she doesn't know. And when she says that to him, essentially straight up, she's like, I don't know how I feel. What are your intentions? He's like, well, what do you want me to say? Well, dude, maybe just say what your intentions are. Are you trying to bang her for a story or no? Then he says something really disturbing during all of that. So here's lovely Dirk again. I've never struck a woman in my life, but you are sorely testing me.
After we've talked about my book, we're going to come back to that, please.
Okay.
Let's bookmark that.
Okay. The next day, he leaves her parents' house, which is essentially a week ahead of time, and then 3 months go by.
Okay, good. She got away from him.
Oh no, Meghan. If only she were so lucky. She's back in Detroit doing her charitable work, which includes visiting shut-ins, elderly shut-ins. And just when I thought things couldn't get any worse in this book, Janet Dailey takes me through the last 20 horrific pages with racism and the biggest setup for domestic violence and an abusive marriage I have ever read about in a romance novel. Dirk is supposed to be coming from an underprivileged background, but acts like the biggest white bigot when encountering some inner city youth that Tory knows that she's friends with. And Dailey herself writes some really icky lines about the language of the street, is what she calls it, in reference to how other characters are talking.
Dialect that is not her own.
She proceeds to visit one of her favorite shut-ins, Mrs. Ogden, with Dirk creepily in tow because he fucking stalked her and found out where she was visiting her shut-ins. That's a red flag. And I want to point out he basically admits to stalking her to find her. But anyway, Mrs. Ogden gives Tory a beautiful handmade crocheted lace tablecloth as a wedding gift because she thinks Tory and Dirk are together. The only thing I could get joy from in this whole book was this dear sweet old woman just knit her a really beautiful keepsake.
I love the crocheted doily-ish gifting, but
it does not make up for the horrors of the rest of this. It's literally the only sweet, nice thing in the entire book is this little crochet tablecloth by this sweet elderly shut-in. And then the real nightmare starts in, because if that wasn't all bad enough, he starts driving the two of them in her car, which he didn't ask her if he could drive it. He just jumps right in and they start driving. When we're married, I have asked your father to disinherit you. If he wants to set up a trust fund administered by his people to take care of you in the event of my death, or for our children, I have no objection. But I don't want you to ever think that I have any interest in your money. Wait, there's more.
I don't want you to have your own money or power in our relationship. Therefore, you won't have access to money or power any longer because we're going to get married and I will have all the control, he says as he's holding the keys to her car.
There's more.
Is that supposed to be romantic? Like, I understand that she's trying to make it sound romantic. Like, he's like, I'm not interested in your money. But to us, it just sounds like, I'd like to put you in prison.
There's so many things wrong with like classic symptoms of men who are narcissists and abusive and like controlling. And okay, he continues. Unless you want the fanfare of a big wedding, I would just as soon be married in a chapel. You've lived in a goldfish bowl long enough. The only notoriety you are going to have from now on is being the wife of Dirk Ramsey. Meghan, there's more.
No, what? Okay. I can't even make a sentence. Go.
You can continue to call Mrs. Ogden as long as the long-distance phone calls don't become absurdly expensive.
I'm taking your money. I'm taking your car. I'm taking your relationships. You belong to me. Oh, boy.
And you can maintain contact with the people you know and love and care for as long as it's not inconvenient for me.
Well, that's just right now. In a couple months when it is inconvenient for me, then it won't matter. And you can just disappear and nobody will even know.
Oh my God, Meghan, it was so disturbing. I couldn't even. And she agrees to marry him and tells him she loves him.
Your book is 100% worse than mine. Mine has a lot of commonalities, but that ending is the beginning of a horror novel.
Exactly. I was like, this is literally horror abuse in the making. Like, you're just seeing like the bad path that this is going to go down.
Yeah.
I have to point out, he never says he loves her, only that he can't live without her. So it's a possession thing.
Yeah.
And then they better get married right away so he can bang her. Like, he's very clear about that. And all I can say is, Tory, you in danger, girl.
Wow. You know, I feel as though you could write a companion novel to this where it would start.
Like the follow-up sequel of horror.
Yeah. Yes. You know, the opening scene would be Tory in the garden with a shovel, and you'd be thinking that she's doing a gardening project, and then you come to realize that Dirk is missing, and the whole thing is right. Because she's had years and years of oppression, and she's trying to take care of a couple little kids, and now she gets to have her inheritance back, and I'm seeing it. Who wants to write this? Someone write this.
The sequel to Enemy in
I'm ready
Camp.
for the sequel.
So, like I said, the only positives I could come up with from this book was the adorable crocheted lace tablecloth from our dear little elderly shut-in. They also did some sightseeing on Mackinac Island on a bicycle built for two, which would have been cute if it hadn't been so rapey in the end. And then I would have enjoyed possibly one quote from this book if Dirk himself hadn't been so creepy, because it was kind of like something that I felt like I could have enjoyed. But then I was like, no, he's just so creepy. He was like, you remind me of liquor with your whiskey light hair and the clouded ice of your eyes, a fine aged whiskey from an old bourbon family. And I was like, I can almost appreciate that. That's almost kind of nice. I like a good alcohol reference. But then I was just like, no, you're so fucking creepy, dude. I can't even do it.
You know what, though? I feel like we could also keep a list of the number of times our hero or heroine is related to some sort of alcohol. I think that'd be another fun thing to write down, because I had that one, my Thanksgiving book last year.
Yes,
Thanksgiving
I
to
remember.
He described his eyes as being like a deep brown whiskey, and I thought that was so beautiful at the time. I feel like we could keep a little list like that.
And I have to tell you, in my next book for our Scottish and Irish theme next month, there is a similar kind of. So I feel like I'm drawn to those references. I don't know why.
Oh, it's amazing. Who would know?
So I'm going to give this one jalapeno as my spice level ranking on our spicy Scoville unit of death here. With obvious use of pepper spray.
Serious pepper spray, yeah.
Serious pepper spray, serious sprays of water, which would clearly not be enough for this douche canoe. So, Meghan.
Yeah.
Tell me about your book.
Well, let's start by saying I feel like I got a head start to our Scottish-Irish theme. So it's the first time I've ever read any Nora Roberts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's what I was going to point out. The irony of we're picking a Roberts book and a Dailey book, because as we discussed on a previous episode with the scandals and plagiarism and romance, Dailey has plagiarized Roberts. And this was completely unintentional on our part, but an interesting coincidence.
Yeah. Well, and I have avoided reading Nora Roberts my whole life only because I've had this probably very poorly placed judgment that if somebody has written this many books, there's no way they can all be good, because how do you turn out that much literature and have it all be good, right? And this was just, like I said, probably very poorly thought out on my part. So it was time for me to give that a chance and to stop being so judgy. So I have this Nora Roberts book because it fits in with our political theme. Main male character is a senator. This particular one is called Alan, but when it was originally published in 1985, the book was called All the Possibilities. So it was originally published in 85, and I do feel like those early 80s books hold a lot of this kind of abrasive, aggressive masculinity. I just feel like we're seeing that a lot, and it comes through in mine as well. The other thing that made it feel like it was really written in 85 is some of the other language, where you said Dailey kind of got a little bit racist in the end. I do have a mention early on in my book of an Oriental boy. And
Lord.
Yeah, that is definitely language we have let go of a long time ago. There's things like that you have to be able to get past when you're like, okay, this book was written like 40 years ago. Clearly things have changed. So my plot, I'm starting with Shelby Campbell. She is the daughter of a U.S. senator who was actually assassinated like 15 years prior. She's an eclectic artist. She owns a pottery shop in the Washington, D.C. area. She is a potter. She's very immersed still in the Capitol Hill scene. Her mother, who was the widow of the senator, is currently dating some sort of ambassador, some sort of foreign ambassador. So Shelby is invited to a big Washington, D.C. party because her mom's going to be there and wants her to attend. So she goes to this party where she meets Senator Alan McGregor. He's a young, up-and-coming politician. He has presidential ambitions. And so the two of them meet, and a lot like your book, where you're saying their first introduction, Dirk is like touching her inappropriately. It just like uninvited, just touching. Same kind of thing with these two. She goes up to the buffet. She grabs a plate full of food. She's kind of using him as cover because she knows a lot of people there. They're all trying to talk to her. She hides behind him and she's like, oh, good. Like, nobody can see me. I'm hiding behind you. I'm starving. I want to get my food. Here, come with me. We'll go out to the balcony. She's just kind of using him to get away from people. They go out to this balcony, and as they're sitting there, she's trying to eat, and he just like reaches over and starts like massaging her hand as she's trying to take food off the plate. They drink out of the same glass. He like bites one of the shrimp she was eating. It's just very odd for people who for people who just met. They're just being very touchy for people who don't know each other. And maybe it's just because I would never do this kind of thing that it feels very strange to me. But when he reaches over and touches her hand, it's not just like a brief, like, oh, what a beautiful ring you have. And like kind of, no, he's like, he touches it. And then they describe how in the next 2 pages, they're still holding hands this whole time, that they're like now eating food with their other hand. I don't know. If their first scene together was going to be getting sexy over food, I mean, I can endorse that. It just felt a little bit unnatural. So anyway, they meet each other there. And as they get through at this meeting, she realizes who he is. She's like, oh, you're a senator. This was fun. Really enjoyed it. Peace. Because her past trauma is, again, her father was assassinated.
Yeah.
She was there when it happened. She's never been able to let that go. Yes.
Yeah.
So she was in the room. And to her, it's like, if you date somebody who's also in politics, inevitably something terrible could happen. So she has a really hard time with that. Well, he doesn't want to take no for an answer, much like your book. So there is a lot in this book, which is just a continuing theme of her saying, hey, yes, I know we both think that the other one's cute, but this is not going to work. Please stop coming to my house. And then he like sends things via courier. Then he shows up at her shop. Then he shows up at her door and he's like, hey, we're going to, go take a drive today. And she's like, absolutely not. And he goes, well, I'm not leaving, so we're going to go take a drive today. She's like, I've already told you no. And he's like, too bad. I'm here. So let's go. That's like the whole book is just him not taking no for an answer. And at some point in time, I feel like in the 80s, we must have thought that was sexy.
There's an entire generation of women who were taught through culture, through books, movies, TV shows, songs even probably, that this is normal, accepted, and pitter-pattery heart behavior. Like, ugh. No.
Yeah, the jealousy and the stalking were signs of attractiveness. I don't know. So that is a huge part of this book, right? Also, like I mentioned earlier, when I poured myself this bouncing bottle of plastic scotch, very Scottish backgrounds here. So there's a lot of that undertone in the book. When they first meet each other and he finds out she's a Campbell, she finds out he's a McGregor, there's a lot of like, oh, your people stole my land. You guys are sore losers. So there's a lot of ancestry kind of battle. They find a lot of humor in the fact that they can kind of go back and forth about that. Him introducing her to his family is a really big deal because his dad is even more staunchly, I'm a McGregor, I'm Clan McGregor, and no Campbell's ever going to cross the threshold of my house, which is when we get into the scotch drinking, because the two of them have like a big kind of standoff, and he pours a big glass of scotch and he's like drinking it as he stares at her. And so then she pours a big glass of scotch and they just glare at each other and drink scotch. That was probably the most fun banter in the book, was watching her with his dad. I felt like the banter between her and Alan was a lot more forced. It didn't feel, I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it. Like there were times where she was supposedly being like cheeky and kind of underhandedly insulting him, and he'd get like super upset about her insulting him. And I would reread the page over and over again going, I don't get the insult. I don't understand what is going on here, why it was so insulting. But maybe I'm not meant to understand it because it shows just how quirky they are and their relationship, and they understand each other so well that he knew it was an insult. It was that kind of thing where, meh.
I feel like there was a lot of that in my book too. And then it would border on this weird situation where like he would be dishing it out, she would dish it a little bit back. And then he was like, oh, you crossed a line and you're just a bitch. And like, dude, if you're like, sassy,
I don't understand this line that supposedly was crossed. Yeah. The overall theme, again, is it was an instantaneous love match, but Shelby's super not into it because she's afraid of the political positions, and her quirky brand of, herself wouldn't necessarily be so good in public as the wife of a senator and possibly somebody who is going to try and be president. She's not the streamlined blonde bombshell, which they bring up multiple times in this book, that she's not a blonde bombshell. She's a small red-headed woman with like a sense of style that comes out of like your grandma's attic.
That sounds like something every Scotsman would love.
Well, and again, he thinks she's great, but I think that's her excuse for why she can't really be with him, because I'm not what Washington expects. And then all of his friends are like, oh, we would have expected you to be with like that blonde over there. It was a lot of that kind of stuff. They were trying so hard to make her quirky. That's pretty much it. That's the whole story. Like him just trying to convince her to marry him, except it's a lot of him just telling her she's gonna marry him. And then people will be like, oh, you're with Shelby now? You know, I'm so glad that you're happy. And he's like, yeah, I can't wait till we get married. Oh, really? When are you getting married? Well, I told her that we'd be getting married. Now I just have to wait for her to finally say yes. And if she doesn't, then I'm going to have to find other tactics to make it happen. I wrote down here that I found Alan McGregor smug, arrogant, and unnecessarily angry. And I found Shelby Campbell flighty, flippant, and unnecessarily indecisive. There are a couple things I appreciated. This sounded a lot like me. So in the very beginning of this book, I'm like, oh, maybe this will be really fun. This person sounds like they could be like me. Shelby was late, but then she always was. It wasn't from any conscious carelessness or need to make an entrance. She was always late because she never finished anything as quickly as she thought she would. I'm like, guilty?
That's so you.
That's me, right? So in the beginning of this book, I'm like, oh, Shelby seems really fun. And then the next page, food was one thing she took very seriously. When she spotted finger-sized quiches, she decided her evening wasn't going to be a total loss after all.
Same.
Right?
I love a tiny quiche.
I'm like, good call. So in the beginning of this book, I was like, it's like, Shelby seems fun. And then the more I got into it, I'm like, Shelby's annoying.
What I'm hearing, Meghan, is for this episode, we should have had tiny quiches and a relish tray.
Oh, dude, a relish tray and scotch is really where it's at, I think, for this particular episode.
But not scotch.
My couple also did. Well, I couldn't say no to the Clan McGregor.
I mean, it's totally on theme. Totally.
Thank you.
Points for on theme.
Thank you. There was a scene in here, too, where she ordered Chinese takeout, but then they needed to get naughty before the takeout got there. So then afterward, they sit around in their pajamas and eat Chinese takeout on the bed. And I was like, I'm cool with that.
Valid. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to have your romp before your food, I feel like, because otherwise you get full and then...
Appropriate. Yeah. If I'm eating first, nothing's happening.
Oh, Bob and I, my husband... I've had that conversation.
Who is it? Who?
My husband, Bob. We've had that conversation, though. Like, if we know we're going out for, like, Valentine's dinner or something, and not to give the audience too much TMI, like, but I think it makes sense to have your romp first and then eat, because otherwise you feel bloated and gross and full of food, and, like, it's not conducive to relations.
You don't choose the food you really want. It's like, I want the garlic bread. I want that stinky thing. I'm sorry. I want the blue cheese on my steak. The last thing here in my appreciation category was that when she was trying to do something creative in her apartment, she put on the movie Casablanca in the background, which is, in my opinion, one of the top 5 movies that's ever been made. And she just listened to it because she knows the movie so well. She doesn't need to watch it. And that is so something I do. Like, I will put on the Pride and Prejudice miniseries because I know it so well. I can just listen to that in the background as I'm going and doing my thing. And I was like, first of all, appreciate the movie choice. And then later on in the movie, somebody quoted Casablanca and she responded with, oh, I just heard the movie not that long ago. And they looked at her and were like, you heard the movie? And I'm like, oh, I get what she's saying. I know exactly what she's saying. So I thought that was nice, but I'm gonna hit a couple of my uncomfy things I didn't like. We already said not taking no for an answer, the fact that the banter sometimes felt forced, but to really punch home the point about the forcefulness and not taking no. So one of the quotes, he cupped her chin in his hand to force her face still, as he gave her a last hard kiss that seemed suspiciously like a threat. Till next time.
Ew, that would creep me out so much. I'd be like, there
No,
will
it's
be no
sexy.
next time, asshole. Don't ever see me again.
No, that's super sexy. And then he shows up at your door and says, we're going on a drive. I'm not leaving.
No, that's
Come
like
on, we're going on a drive.
stalkery.
I'm not leaving.
Gross. Megan, my anxiety would be like through the roof.
Then I've got this one where I wrote ragey forced kissing and victim blaming. This was after their banter where she supposedly was trying to insult him, and I did not understand the insults. I went back and read that page 3 or 4 times. I still don't quite understand what he found so insulting, but apparently he was super insulted. They get back to her apartment, and he does this, the ragey forced kissing. And then the next day, this is her response. It had been entirely her fault. She couldn't deny it. Being rude and nasty wasn't something she set out to do often, but she'd done a good job of it. It had been entirely her fault. I didn't particularly care for these characters. I had a lot of hope in the beginning. Like I said, reading those things about her being kind of quirky and she was late and she loved the food. And I'm like, oh, this is my kind of girl. And then the more we got into it, I was like, no, I don't particularly care for her. Now, that being said, I liked the writing better than I thought I would. So
Okay.
I'm going to take that away as a win. I would definitely try another Nora Roberts book at some time, but I might try and find something that was maybe published a little bit later. I think that's a big problem you and I have been having is we started this journey as kind of a nostalgia thing. And so we're grabbing books. Initially, we were grabbing books that were from the nostalgia area for us, and we are finding all this problematic stuff. We have since found that we enjoy the more progressive books and things that were written more recently, and I do feel like we are now starting to probably trend that direction. I've got a whole lot of books still sitting there that are from this earlier
Same
time period. I don't
Yeah.
know that I'm going to be reading them. Those might end up being donations, and I might just restart because I don't care for them as much, and it just makes me look at it and think how far we've actually come.
All valid
know?
points, because I still love historical romances, but I am
Mhm.
also finding, as you mentioned, the ones published more recently are kind of tickling my fancy more than the other ones. And we have compiled this entire catalog, essentially. Big old spreadsheet of all these books
Okay.
we've been sourcing as we've been on our book hunting journeys. And I agree with you. I've been looking back at some of them. I'm like, I don't know that I can do it. Like,
Yeah.
I think occasionally we might still throw in some more of these, I'm going to call them vintage, more of these vintage novels for funsies, or if something particularly seems like it's going to spark joy for us. But I don't know that I can continue to torture myself
Yeah.
with some of this.
Oh, my phone is a-ringing. It is my husband. My husband. Adam. One moment, please. Hey, dude, I'm on my podcast with Nicole. Call you back. That was my husband, Adam. Adam, my husband. So I've got that whole box. And I know you do too.
Yeah.
Of these novels we initially picked up being like, this will be so fun to read these. I think I'm going to have to cull the herd. I do. And
I do too. Yeah.
I spent a good hour the other day actually on the website for Ripped Bodice, which for those of you who haven't heard, Ripped Bodice is this great bookstore that sells pretty much only romance novels. And so you can order them online. You can have them shipped to your house. They do have a physical location.
They have 2. So one is in New
Yeah.
York, in Brooklyn, and one is in California.
Okay, so there's 2 physical locations, but I clearly don't live in those places, so they will have to ship me my books. But I was going through and picking out things that seemed a lot more me and of this time for me, and things that were maybe a little bit stretching my boundaries, even like things that I hadn't thought about reading before but sounded really interesting. And I based that on looking at what authors are coming to the Romance Con in Milwaukee in September.
Yes.
And I was looking up what books I could find at Ripped Bodice so that I could maybe read some of those in advance to attending the conference. So I now have $200-ish worth of stuff sitting in my cart at Ripped Bodice.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I'm not going to be able to buy all today, so I have to pick a few and kind of roll them out. But I just feel like going forward, for those of you who have sat with us through some of these a little bit more difficult books.
Oh gosh, yeah.
With some problematic themes, we may have some coming up that are going to be a little bit more of the times and a little bit more things that we will recommend reading instead of continuing to say, okay.
Just to take it back a little bit. For your current book, what's the spicy scale?
My spicy scale is probably like somewhere between a jalapeno and a habanero. The scenes didn't necessarily get overly spicy, but there were a lot of them. And there was some pool sex, which I know you love your submerged endeavors. So
I don't.
Bring that
I really don't. I don't think water is conducive to a smooth glide. Whatever.
And then a couple chapters later, somebody was like, oh, let's all go swimming. And she's like, oh, I didn't bring my swimsuit. And they're like, there's a whole closet full of bathing suits you can choose from. And I'm like, ew, that's even worse. I don't want your closet full of suits. I don't know you. I don't know you like that.
Ick, ick, ick.
It says there's a closet full in the bathhouse. And I'm like, nah.
God, no. Thank you. At all. Burn those.
Beyond that, there was a word that I really liked that I had probably seen before but never really honed in on. The word gloaming. Gloaming.
Okay,
gloaming.
This is funny because usually when I say a word, you're like, oh yeah, I know that word.
Do you know this one?
I do know this one, and I
did
love gloaming.
It's a beautiful word.
Yeah. Also, Meghan, I got to tell you, I just finished the Scottish one on the ship.
Yeah.
Thrumming hit again. Never in my life have I seen thrumming used so many times as in recently.
The word thrumming and gloaming. He was thrumming in the gloaming evening.
But was there a mane of spume?
There was no mane of spume. That might be a one-off that we will never have duplicated until one of us writes a book.
I feel like we need some kind of party or celebration if we ever hit mane of spume again in a book.
Mane of spume. That's like the ultimate. That is beyond, Carolina Reaper. Mane of spume is like on the...
It needs its own category. I have to tell you too, one of our favorite podcast followers, Melissa. We love Melissa.
Of course.
I did a little post on social media about running out of my smut on the cruise ship during my vacation last week. And because I'm reading in preparation for next month with the Scottish theme, I posted that a Scot is not enough. And she made a really fun comment about, so is it a Scotch bonnet level? And I was like, oh my God, Melissa, spot on. It is not a Scotch bonnet level, but I loved her heat reference in terms of our spicy Scoville unit.
We just need to start bringing in all these little peppers. Bring them in.
I think that's going to get really convoluted, but I totally think for March, let's throw in the Scotch bonnet level.
I think that's a good idea.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I started our Scotsman early here with my McGregors and Campbells. They were not a Scotch bonnet, but there was a lot. There was a lot of making out.
So, Meghan, was there any romantic reminder that could be gleaned from your book?
So we'll get to romantic reminders, but I'm so excited about the booby prize because Nicole always wins.
I don't always win, just 90% of the time.
Yeah. I have won only once fairly, twice because of defaults, because she read a book with no references. And I don't think that even counts. And the book I read last time around, they didn't even mention breast. They said knife to her breastbone. And that was 5 pages from the end. You win by leaps and bounds most of the time. So when you mentioned that you were page 43, I have been inwardly holding my glee this entire time. Yeah, because I'm page 36. And I thought for sure it wouldn't be early enough.
You just barely beat me.
I know. I thought it wasn't going to be early enough. So when you said your page, I'm like, yes. Okay.
Okay, give me your quote. Give me your boob quote.
So mine is, the t-shirt shifted over small, firm breasts. I win. I win my
There you go.
friends, page 36.
Way to win with the tiny breasts.
Okay. I mean, I always win with the tiny breasts. That's daily for me. So my romantic reminder this time around is to pay attention to what your partner actually likes. And this is what I
Ooh.
mean. There are a lot of people who, when they get into a relationship, they're like, oh, it's Valentine's Day. I should send a dozen roses. I guess that's thoughtful if that's what your partner really likes. But that's also the default. So a lot of people just default to, here's the dozen roses. In this particular book, Alan at least recognized that the girl he wanted to date was a little bit quirky. That wasn't going to work for her. And so when he did have things sent to her house, the very first thing he had sent was actually a basket of strawberries. Just fresh strawberries from like the farmer's market. And she even said, she's like, I could have resisted roses. I could have resisted all these other things, but strawberries, that was actually super thoughtful. And then after that, he sent like a stuffed animal, but it was like a stuffed animal pig. And it was just like weird enough. And then after that, the courier showed up with like balloons. And then at one point in time, she sent him from the courier a goldfish in like a bowl. And I'm like, they're just sending each other things that are slightly weird enough where it's like not what the normal person would expect, which means they were actually putting thought into what their partner wanted. And it was just one of those things where I'm like, okay, I wouldn't want a stuffed animal pig, but he clearly knew her well enough to know what to send, what would actually tickle her fancy. And so I could respect that. So when I say think about what your partner actually wants, it's like, absolutely, Valentine's Day, great, send something. But what do they actually want on Valentine's Day? So, romantic reminder.
Okay, I actually really liked that they took this cute little bicycle built for two for a little sightseeing adventure around Mackinac Island. And I think looking for those moments of exploration is a nice thing, because in previous books we've talked about, and it was Janet Dailey previously.
It was. I was going to bring this up.
And it was Kentucky. It was about exploring your surroundings with your partner, your significant other. And this one, I'm going to say it's looking for those opportune moments to create a unique experience as you explore those surroundings. So a bicycle bit for two, yeah, like that's a unique opportunity to explore. That's all I could glean from this book, honestly, Megan. It was a struggle to even come up with that, because I was like, no means no. That's the tip.
Yeah.
But that's not a romantic reminder. That's just a rule in life.
Yeah. It's a rule that we've gotten better with as time has gone on.
I hope so.
Well,
I really hope so. But I thoroughly enjoyed delving into my Scottish foray. I know this was your pre-Scottish foray.
Yeah, I had my next one is Irish, so I'm going from the Scots to the Irish. But I am very. I know I mentioned it before. I'm so hesitant because again, this was the quintessential romance novel for me when I was younger. This was like the novel, and I know I'm going to read this, and I'm going to be so thoroughly disappointed. I can tell you already from what I remember, this book is absolutely. There's going to be pepper spray. There is going to be trigger warnings for assault.
Oh, no.
I remember that for sure. I also remember her being very young in the beginning and there being an age gap for sure between her and him. So it's going to be one of those that I would love for this to live up to my memories. But I think because of how I'm feeling right now, it's why I'm like, I think I'm going to have to switch over to some of those books from Ripped Bodice instead, because this might be the last test of getting me through. Shall I read you the back?
Yes, please.
Caitlin was an orphaned beauty with no future until the rugged outlaw nobleman rescued her from the streets. And now they ride together in the shadows of the night, on the run from corrupt minions of the law, emboldened by the exhilarating heat of the chase, and by a love as wild and free as the wind on the moors. Caitlin has vowed that she will never forsake Connor, her brave champion, her sensuous lover. But to save Connor, she must now betray him. Yet the proud lady can never betray the passion that joins their hearts and draws Connor into harm's way to rescue his cherished love once more.
Oh my.
So that is it. Karen Robard's Dark of the Moon, the romance novel that started everything for me romance novel-wise when I was
this your first? Was this your very first read?
I think it would have been my very first one that was that explicit. I think before that, it would have been like Little Harlequins, where it was like the Duke and Duchess get married, you know, like, and it was
like
it was some
Barbara
little...
Cartland.
Yeah, it would have been like something that was like 100 pages long, and it was like, she was virginal, he was a duke. Someone said they should get married. Her father gave him $100 in dowry. Look at them walk down the aisle. Yeah, I think that would have been it. And then this was the one that there were actual body parts and things happening. And again, when you guys hear me talk about on our next podcast, keep in mind the reason this book even existed in my household. My sister's name is Caitlin. The main character in this book is Caitlin, spelled the same way as my sister. So my grandmother read this book, saw the name Caitlin, and gave it to my mother and said, there's the girl named Caitlin in this book. And my mom took this book and shoved it on a shelf in our house. She never read it. But if you put a book in our house,
somebody's going to read it.
All the rest of the people are going to read it. All right, Nicole, what do you got? What are we reading next?
Yes.
What Scott is not enough?
Scott is not enough. This one's by Gina Conkle, who is a USA Today best-selling author. Alexander Sloan is finally a finger's breadth from achieving the government post he's tirelessly worked toward for years. He has one last step before he rises to the top. Dig up incriminating evidence on the most captivating woman in London, but he discovers more than he bargained for when he comes face to face with the goddess of Swan Lake. Cecilia MacDonald has one mission: find and steal the ceremonial dagger taken from her clan by British soldiers, has never had any trouble using men to do her bidding, and she's enjoying the cat and mouse game she's playing with the delectable Alexander. But when a mutual enemy proves deadly, she must rely on him for more than flirtation to gain the dagger. As Alexander and Cecilia become unlikely allies, their desire for each other overwhelms them. When shocking secrets come to light, will Alexander realize loving the wrong woman is the right thing to do? Just as a sneak peek, this is an actual bodice ripper. Actual bodices were ripped. I'm so excited. This is the first one of our project where there was an actual bodice ripping. I can't contain my excitement.
Girl, I wonder. This one might. I can't remember. This one might. Have some bodice ripping.
Oh my God.
I will let
Two
you know.
bodice rippers?
I thank you for joining us today for Romance on the Rocks. Please like, subscribe, and follow. And if you're a hopelessly romantic fellow bookish biddy like us, think about giving us a review on Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you catch your podcasts. Your support really means the world to us. And until next time, stay safe and know that you are loved.
Want to show Romance on the Rocks podcast your love? It's easy. Visit www.buymeacoffee.com/romanceontherocks. You can buy us a book or two and show us your love and support. Thanks in advance.